The grand halls of Valora's capital palace shimmered with silver walls and tall crystal windows. It was a place built to remind everyone of the pride and discipline of the Valoran Empire. At the center of the chamber stood Princess Selara, her face calm yet her eyes burning with quiet fire. She had spoken against the council only 2 days ago, refusing to follow their orders in a matter of war. Her words had been strong, and her voice had carried across the great chambers where nobles and generals had been gathered. The council saw her act as dangerous, for no member of the royal line was allowed to challenge the empire's judgment in public. Now, the punishment was announced. The council leader, an elder named Voran, spoke with a voice like stone. Princess Selara, you have placed pride above unity. For this offense, you will marry a human soldier. The union will remind you that loyalty comes before honor, and it will remind the empire that no one stands above duty. Whispers spread across the chamber. A princess of Valora, whose people considered themselves advanced and noble, would be forced to marry a human. Many of the council thought of humans as stubborn, simple, and barely worthy of standing among their empire. To them, this was a punishment more humiliating than exile. Selara raised her head, refusing to let them see weakness. Inside, however, her thoughts raced. She had expected a heavy fine or even removal from command. But this marriage was worse than anything she had imagined. Her family's name would be tied to a human. To her, it felt like a chain placed around her neck. The chosen man stood quietly to one side of the chamber. His name was Tomasz, a soldier who had fought bravely in the border wars. His record showed courage in battles where others had fled. He was not born of noble blood, not even a leader, yet he had been selected for this role. Tomasz stood tall, his uniform plain compared to the jeweled robes of the Valoran guards. His expression was steady, though his eyes revealed surprise and unease. He had not asked for this. To him, the marriage felt like being thrown into a game of power he did not understand. Yet orders were orders, and he had faced worse on battlefields. He remained silent, though the weight of hundreds of alien eyes pressed on him. The ceremony was quick. No music played, no celebration filled the hall. Instead, the vows were spoken in a voice that echoed more like a command than a blessing. The council declared them bound, and the people of Valora bowed their heads in obedience. When the crowd left, Selara stood apart from Tomasz, her eyes sharp with defiance. "You may think this is an honor," she said quietly, her tone like ice, "but to me, it is punishment. Do not think that my silence means acceptance." Tomasz met her gaze without flinching. His voice was calm, though not without steel. "I did not ask for this any more than you did. But if we are bound, then we will endure it. I have survived worse trials than disapproval." Her eyes narrowed. She was not used to such direct words, especially from a human. For a moment, she considered speaking further, but instead she turned away. Their new home was not in the shining capital but on a distant world at the edge of the empire, a place chosen by the council to keep them away from daily politics. The planet, though under Valoran control, had a human colony nearby. Selara saw this as yet another insult. To be forced to live so close to humans, far from the heart of her people, felt like exile wrapped in duty. The journey there was silent. Selara stared out of the starship windows, her arms folded, refusing to speak. Tomasz, on the other hand, kept his mind busy with thought. He did not know much about the Valoran court, but he knew soldiers, and he knew survival. If this marriage was punishment for her, then it was also a test for him. He did not plan to fail. When they arrived, the planet stretched before them with wide green plains and deep blue skies. The Valoran structures were tall and shining, while the human colony stood smaller, simpler, yet full of movement. Selara frowned at the sight, thinking it beneath her. Tomasz, however, looked with steady eyes, knowing that this place would shape their future. That night, when they entered the residence prepared for them, The silence returned. The house was large, built with Valoran elegance but placed close enough to see the human colony lights in the distance. Alira stood near the balcony, her gaze on the stars above. "This is a prison," she whispered to herself. Tomasz, sitting near the table, did not reply at first. He only looked at her with quiet thought before saying, "Prisons can be broken, but sometimes they can also be turned into something else. Time will decide which one this is." Her expression hardened. She believed no human could understand the weight of her punishment. Yet something in his tone stayed with her, as if there was more to this man than she had first thought. The first night of their union ended not with warmth but with cold silence. Both carried the burden of a forced bond. Neither could yet see what the future would bring, but the seeds of change had already been planted. The days that followed were quiet and heavy. The house given to Alira and Tomasz was large, filled with shining walls and soft lights, yet it felt empty. Every corner carried silence, and the air was thick with distance between them. Alira moved through the halls like a shadow, her steps graceful but cold. Tomasz spent his time in the training yard outside, moving with the discipline of a soldier, as if every swing of his practice blade kept his thoughts in order. At the dining table, silence ruled. Meals were set out by silent servants, yet neither spoke much. Alira would sit straight, her eyes never meeting Tomasz, eating slowly and with care. Tomasz, used to rough rations and battlefield hunger, finished quickly and quietly, then returned to his duties outside. The space between them grew larger with every passing hour. To Alira, this was all a test of endurance. She told herself that she would never lower her pride to speak with him. She had been forced into this union, and though the vows were binding, her heart remained untouched. She looked at Tomasz and saw only the symbol of her punishment. Tomasz, however, did not take her silence as insult. He had seen soldiers break under the weight of war, men who had shouted, cursed, or even begged for relief. Silence was not the worst burden he had carried. Still, he wondered how long they could live this way, under the same roof yet worlds apart. One evening, the silence finally broke. A group of Valoran nobles came to visit, curious to see the princess in her new life. They arrived with flowing robes and proud voices, walking through the house as if it belonged to them. They spoke to Alira with polite tones, but their eyes were sharp, watching her every move. "Princess," one of them said, "we had heard stories, but now we see the truth. To think that you, the jewel of the empire, would be placed here, with a human." The words were said with a smile, but the meaning was cruel. Alira kept her face calm, though inside her anger burned. She wanted to answer, to remind them that her spirit had not been broken, but before she could speak, Tomasz stepped forward. His voice was steady. "You speak as though I am beneath you, yet I stood on the battlefield where many would not. Do not mistake silence for weakness." The nobles turned their eyes to him, some amused, others offended. Tomasz did not waver. His words were not shouted, but they carried weight. The room grew tense, and for a moment, Alira herself felt surprise. Few dared to stand so boldly before Valoran nobles, especially a human. The visitors left soon after, their smiles thin, their whispers sharp. When the doors closed behind them, Alira turned to Tomasz, her eyes narrowed. "Do you enjoy speaking for me, soldier? Do you think it is your place?" Tomasz met her gaze calmly. "No. But I do not allow mockery, not of myself and not of those tied to me. Whether you like it or not, they will see weakness in this union. I will not feed their pride." His words lingered in the air. Alira turned away, hiding the faint stir of something she could not name. She wanted to be angry, but a small part of her felt the weight of his defense. She said nothing more, and the silence returned. Days passed, and life on the planet continued. The human colony nearby was alive with activity. Children ran through dusty streets, Workers repaired their machines, and families gathered in simple homes. Alira watched sometimes from a distance, studying the humans with quiet disdain. They seemed content with so little, living without the elegance or order of Valoran cities. To her, it was strange, almost foolish. Tomasz, however, often walked among them. He spoke with old soldiers, shared meals with families, and even helped repair broken tools. When he returned home, his clothes carried dust, and his hands bore marks of work. Alira could not understand it. "You are a soldier of the Empire now," she said one evening, her voice sharp. "Why waste your time with them? You do not belong to them anymore." Tomasz looked at her steadily. "I belong where I choose to stand. They are my people, whether the council says so or not. They fight, they struggle, and they survive. That is enough." Alira had no answer. His calm strength unsettled her. He was not like the Valoran men she knew, who hid behind rank or power. He carried himself as if he needed no title to hold his ground. That night, Alira lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The silence of the house pressed against her, but her mind replayed Tamash's words. She told herself she did not care, that this was only duty, only punishment. Yet she could not push away the thought that perhaps this man was more than she wished to admit. The cold union held firm, but cracks had begun to form. Neither spoke of it, but both felt the shift. Somewhere between silence and defiance, a thread had been tied. It was still fragile, but it was there, waiting for the weight of the future to test its strength. The planet at the edge of the Empire was calm for many weeks. Alira and Tomasz lived in the same house, still divided by silence. She stayed inside most days, reading messages from the capital and trying to keep her dignity. Tomasz spent more time with the human colony, training young soldiers and repairing old machines. They lived side by side, yet apart, as if two worlds had been forced into one. But peace never lasted long on border worlds. One morning, alarms sounded across the colony. The ground shook as warning towers flashed red lights. Ships had entered the skies, enemy ships, sharp and black, moving like shadows over the blue horizon. The Empire had long known of rival forces seeking to break their hold on distant planets. Now those rivals had come. Alira rushed to the balcony, her eyes wide as she saw the fleet forming in the sky. Her heart raced, but her training as a princess and commander returned. She turned quickly and found Tomasz already strapping on his gear, his face calm but firm. "They are coming for the colony," Tomasz said, his voice steady. "If they take this world, both humans and Valorans here will fall." Alira frowned. "Then we must wait for reinforcements from the capital. The Empire will not let this planet fall so easily." Tomasz shook his head. "Reinforcements will take weeks to arrive. By then, this colony will be ashes. We must act now." She stared at him, stunned. To her, the thought of humans resisting a full fleet seemed foolish. But then she looked at his eyes. There was no fear, only determination. For a moment, her pride softened, replaced by a question she had not dared ask: what if he was right? The first wave of enemy ships descended. Explosions tore through the outskirts of the human colony. Smoke rose into the sky, and cries echoed from the streets. Alira's heart clenched as she watched families run for shelter. She had always seen humans as weaker, but now she saw their fear and their courage as they tried to protect one another. Tomasz moved quickly, rallying a group of men and women in the colony square. They had little old rifles, makeshift barricades, and broken vehicles. Yet they gathered around him as if his presence alone gave them hope. Alira stood apart, uncertain. She had been trained in strategy, in commanding fleets and armies, yet she had never seen such raw desperation. These people had no polished weapons, no shining armor, only the will to survive. Then Tomasz spoke, his voice carrying over the noise of panic. We do not fight for glory. We fight for our homes, for our families, for the ground beneath our feet. They think we are weak, but we will show them that even the smallest stone can break the sharpest blade." The crowd answered with a roar, their fear turning to fire. Alira felt her chest tighten. She had given many speeches in her life, but none had carried such weight. His words were simple, yet they reached the heart. For the first time, she saw why the council had chosen him. When the enemy troops landed, the battle began. Alira joined Tamash, standing at his side as he led the defense. She guided the humans with sharp commands, using her knowledge of tactics to position them behind cover and strike where the enemy was weakest. Tamash fought in the front lines, his rifle steady, his movements fearless. The clash was brutal. Enemy soldiers, tall and armored, advanced with precision. Yet the humans, though poorly armed, fought with a spirit that surprised even Alira. They moved with determination, covering one another, refusing to give ground. At one point, the enemy broke through a barricade, rushing toward a group of unarmed civilians. Alira saw it first, her heart leaping. Before she could move, Tamash was already there, throwing himself between the civilians and the attackers. He fought with every ounce of strength, forcing the enemy back until reinforcements arrived. Alira felt a rush of emotion she could not name. She had seen many warriors in her life, but none who fought like this, not for honor, not for empire, but for people. By nightfall, the first wave was repelled. Smoke filled the air, and the ground was scarred, but the colony still stood. Exhausted humans sat on the ground, their faces dirty but alive. Children clung to their parents, and for the first time, hope flickered in their eyes. Alira walked among them, her head held high but her heart heavy with thought. She saw them look to Tamash with respect, as if he were more than just a soldier. He had become their leader, their shield. That evening, as the fires burned low, Alira approached him. He was sitting by the edge of the colony, cleaning his rifle. His face was tired, his hands marked with scratches, but his eyes were still steady. "You fought with courage," Alira said quietly. The words felt strange on her tongue, but she could not deny the truth. Tamash looked at her, his expression calm. "We all fought. Courage does not belong to one person. It belongs to anyone who chooses not to bow." She did not answer. Instead, she sat beside him, her gaze on the stars above. For the first time since their union, the silence between them did not feel cold. It felt heavy, yes, but also alive, as if something new had begun to grow. The clash of worlds was not only between empires and fleets. It was between pride and humility, between old judgment and new understanding. And in that clash, Alira found herself changing, though she did not yet know how deeply. The colony did not rest after the first battle. Everyone knew the enemy would return. The dark fleet still circled the skies, waiting for the next strike. Smoke still rose from broken buildings, and the cries of wounded filled the night air. Yet even in the middle of fear, there was movement and determination. Tamash worked beside the humans and Valorans alike, helping rebuild barricades and repair weapons. His hands were rough, his clothes torn, but his spirit remained unshaken. Wherever he stood, people followed. They trusted him, not because of rank or title, but because he had stood in front of death for them. Alira watched him closely. At first, she had believed this man was nothing more than a punishment forced upon her. Yet now she saw something else. He was no noble commander, no prince with polished armor, but there was strength in him that she could not ignore. Still, she struggled to accept it. Her pride whispered that he was only human, simple, and stubborn. But her heart whispered something different, something she tried hard to silence. The next attack came 3 days later. This time, the enemy brought heavier machines, walking constructs of steel that marched through the fields. Their weapons cut through barricades with ease, scattering defenders. Alira found herself at the command post, shouting orders. Her voice was strong, her mind sharp. She had studied war for years, and her knowledge of strategy gave the defenders an edge. She sent runners to relay messages, moving groups into safer positions, using the land itself as their shield. Meanwhile, Tomasz fought in the front lines. He moved like a man born for battle, his rifle never shaking, his body pushing forward even when wounds slowed him. When defenders fell, he lifted them back to safety. When civilians were trapped, he broke through fire to reach them. At one moment, Alira saw a squad of enemy soldiers break through a weak point in the defense. They rushed toward her command post, their weapons glowing. She drew her blade, ready to fight, though she knew she was outnumbered. Before the soldiers reached her, Tomasz appeared. He had come from the front lines, his body covered in dust and blood. Without hesitation, he threw himself into the fight. His rifle roared, and when the shots ran out, he used the weapon itself as a club. The enemy pressed hard, but Tomasz refused to fall. Alira joined him, her blade flashing in the dim light. Side by side, they fought, one with skill and the other with pure grit. The clash was brutal, but together they forced the enemy back. When the last soldier fell, Alira's chest heaved with exhaustion. She looked at Tomasz, who leaned on his weapon, breathing heavily. He was injured, his arm cut, his side bruised, yet his eyes were still steady. "You are reckless," Alira said, her voice sharp but unsteady. Tomasz gave a small smile. "And you are alive." For a moment, silence hung between them. Then Alira looked away, but she could not hide the strange warmth in her chest. The battle lasted through the day, but by nightfall, the colony still stood. The humans cheered, their voices rising together, a sound of hope and defiance. Alira walked among them, listening to their laughter despite the destruction around them. These people had so little, yet they found joy in survival. That night, Alira sat on the steps outside their residence, staring at the stars. Tomasz joined her, his arm wrapped in cloth from his wound. For a while, neither spoke. Finally, Alira broke the silence. "I was trained all my life to lead armies, to command fleets. I believed strength was in blood and power. But today I saw strength in places I never thought to look." Tomasz nodded slowly. Strength is not always in titles or weapons. Sometimes it is simply refusing to bow when the world tells you to. She turned her eyes to him, studying his face in the starlight. There was nothing royal in him, nothing polished. Yet he carried something greater, a fire that no punishment, no empire, could extinguish. For the first time, Alira felt her pride loosen. She did not speak of it, but deep inside, she began to wonder if this union was not just punishment. Perhaps it was fate, showing her a truth she had never seen before. When dawn came, both of them rose early. There was work to do, defenses to strengthen, and people to protect. Alira walked beside Tomasz, no longer keeping as much distance. They spoke little, but the silence between them was different now. It was no longer cold, it was shared. The struggle of the colony was not just a fight for survival. It was a test of hearts, of trust, and of what could grow in the middle of fire. And in that struggle, Alira and Tomasz had taken their first true steps together, not as strangers forced into marriage, but as two warriors standing side by side. The colony carried scars of battle, but it did not fall. Each morning smoke still rose from broken homes, yet people came out with tools in their hands instead of tears in their eyes. They worked together, rebuilding walls, repairing machines, and tending to the wounded. Alira walked through the streets, her long robe brushing against the dust. She had expected despair, yet what she saw was different. Human children laughed as they helped carry stones, women sang while mending roofs, and men who had fought the night before now built barricades with steady hands. It puzzled her. Valorans believed that pride and power gave strength. But these humans had neither wealth nor technology. Their weapons were old, their defenses simple, and still they endured. They found hope where she would have expected only fear. One afternoon, Alira stood near the edge of the colony, watching a group of humans struggle to lift a heavy beam for a damaged house. The wood slipped, threatening to crush them. Before she could react, Tomasz rushed forward, his shoulder braced beneath the beam. Others joined quickly, and together they raised it high until it slid into place. Cheers broke out, and laughter followed, even from the youngest children. Alira shook her head softly. "How can they laugh at a time like this?" she whispered. Tomasz, hearing her, turned with a faint smile. "Because laughter is also strength. You cannot fight every day if you do not learn to breathe between battles." His words stayed with her. She followed him that day, watching how he moved among the people. He spoke with the old, encouraged the young, and listened to their fears without judgment. He was no prince, yet they treated him like one. Not because of birth, but because he stood with them. Later that night, the leaders of the colony gathered. The enemy fleet still hovered above, and everyone knew the next attack would be larger. Supplies were running low, weapons fewer with every clash. The Valoran commanders who had been stationed there argued among themselves, insisting they wait for reinforcements. Alira sat in silence until Tomasz spoke. His voice was firm, yet calm. "If we wait, we die. We must fight with what we have, and we must use every strength we hold. Not just weapons, but spirit, unity, and will." One Valoran officer scoffed. "Spirit cannot stop war machines." Tomasz met his gaze without flinching. "Maybe not. But spirit keeps a man standing when his body wants to fall. Spirit makes a child carry stone to rebuild a wall. Spirit is why this colony is still alive tonight. If you cannot see that, then you have already lost." The room fell quiet. Alira studied Tomasz closely. She realized then that he was not only a soldier. He was something more. He carried the hidden strength of his people, a strength not written in books of war, but alive in every hand that built, every voice that sang, every heart that refused to break. The next morning, Alira decided to walk into the colony alone. For the first time, she spoke with the humans without Tomasz beside her. She sat with mothers who had lost husbands in battle, listened to elders who remembered older wars, and even joined children in carrying water to the wounded. Their smiles surprised her. They looked at her not as a distant princess but as someone who was sharing their struggle. By the time she returned to the house, dust clung to her clothes and her arms ached from lifting supplies. Tomasz looked at her with quiet respect, but he said nothing. She gave him a short nod, a silent admission that she had begun to understand. That evening, the colony lit small fires across the square. People gathered, not for war, but for unity. They sang songs in simple voices, their melodies rising into the night sky. Alira stood among them, feeling the warmth of the fire against her skin, and for the first time since her punishment began, she felt something close to belonging. Tomasz stood beside her. "You see it now, don't you?" he asked softly. Alira glanced at him. "I see that humans are not weak. They carry strength in ways my people never cared to notice. Perhaps that is why the council sent me here." Tomasz gave a faint smile. "Maybe. Or maybe they only wanted to punish you. But punishment or not, you are here now. And here, you will learn what power truly means." She looked back at the crowd, at their smiling faces despite the coming danger. For years, she had believed strength was only in might and control. But tonight she saw a different kind of power, the power of unity, of hope, of refusing to break even when the world pressed hard against you. The hidden strength of humanity was no longer hidden from her. It was alive, burning bright in every person who stood ready to fight again. And in that fire, Alira felt her own pride shifting, shaping into something new. The enemy fleet did not wait long. Days after the fires of Unity, the black ships descended again, this time with full force. Their machines rumbled across the plains, their weapons glowing like burning suns. The sky darkened with smoke as explosions shook the ground. The colony prepared as best it could. Barricades stood stronger than before, watchtowers were rebuilt, and every able man and woman carried a weapon. But still, the enemy came in numbers greater than ever. Alira stood in the command square, her armor shining faintly under the gray sky. She had chosen to fight not from the palace walls but among the people. Her pride had changed into something sharper, something tied to those she now called allies. Beside her stood Tamash. His uniform was torn, his rifle scratched, but his eyes carried the same steady fire. He looked at the battlefield, then at her. This will be the hardest fight yet. If we fall here, the colony falls with us. Alira nodded. For once, she did not argue. Instead, she said, then we will not fall. The enemy attack began with a roar. Heavy machines stormed forward, their cannons tearing through the outer barricades. Enemy soldiers followed, their armor glinting as they marched with mechanical precision. Tamash led the front lines, shouting commands and pushing soldiers into stronger positions. His voice carried above the thunder of battle, giving courage to those who might have broken. Alira directed squads across the field, her strategic mind using every hill and wall as a shield. For hours, the clash raged. Humans and Valorans fought side by side, their smaller weapons striking against stronger machines. The ground shook, dust filled the air, and still they stood. At one point, the enemy broke through the western line. Families screamed as soldiers rushed toward the heart of the colony. Alira saw it happen and dashed forward, her blade flashing as she cut through attackers. Tamash joined her, his rifle barking fire until the last soldier fell. But victory came at a cost. Tamash was struck during the fight, a deep wound across his shoulder. Alira saw him fall to one knee, his weapon slipping. Without hesitation, she pulled him to cover, her own blade holding off the enemy until help arrived. Stay down, she said sharply, her voice carrying both fear and anger. Tamash gritted his teeth, pressing his hand against his wound. I cannot stay down. If I stop now, others will fall. She met his eyes, and for the first time, she saw not just stubbornness but a truth she had ignored. His strength came not from refusing pain, but from refusing to let others carry it alone. With help from others, Tamash rose again, his weapon in hand. The sight of him standing, bloodied but unbroken, spread through the battlefield like fire. The humans cheered, their courage redoubled, and even Valoran soldiers fought harder. Alira felt a surge of emotion she had never known before. Her people had taught her that victory came from power and control. But now she saw victory born from something deeper: faith, loyalty, and unity. And Tamash had become the heart of it. As the sun set, the enemy launched one last desperate strike. Their machines pushed hard, their soldiers rushing with fury. Alira and Tamash fought side by side, their movements in perfect rhythm. He defended her flank, she covered his, and together they cut through the strongest of foes. At last, the enemy broke. Smoke covered the plains as their ships retreated into the sky. The colony stood, scarred but alive. People raised their voices in triumph, their cries of victory filling the air. Exhausted, Alira and Tamash stood on the battlefield, their bodies heavy but their spirits alive. Around them, children clung to parents, friends embraced, and songs of survival began once more. Alira looked at Tamash, her chest tight. You should not have survived that wound, she said softly. Tamash gave a tired smile. Humans are hard to kill. She almost laughed, though her eyes carried more than humor. She saw him now not as punishment, not as burden, but as partner. He had saved her, saved the colony, and shown her a strength her people had long ignored. That night, as fires burned low and the stars returned to the sky, Alira stood among the people. She saw their joy, their hope, their unity. And in her heart, she understood that the turning point was not only the battle, it was her. She was no longer the proud princess forced into marriage. She was now part of something greater, tied to both humans and Valorans, bound not by punishment but by choice. The war was not over. The enemy would return again, and the Empire's council would still watch from afar. But Alira knew the future had already shifted. A human had stood where even nobles would have fallen, and she had stood with him. The turning point had come, and nothing would ever be the same again. The days after the great battle were filled with silence, rebuilding, and reflection. The colony had survived, but scars lay everywhere. The walls were broken in places, the fields carried the marks of fire, and many families mourned the ones they had lost. Yet at the same time, there was hope. For the first time, both humans and Valorans believed they could stand together and win. Alira moved through the colony each morning, no longer as the distant princess but as one of the people. She carried no crown, no veil of pride. Children followed her, laughing when she tried to copy their simple games. Workers called out her name with respect, not because she was of noble blood, but because she had fought at their side. Tomasz, still healing from his wound, walked slower than before, yet he was always present. He helped repair the watchtowers, lifted stones for the builders, and joined the guards in training younger fighters. His arm was scarred, his body worn, but his spirit was stronger than ever. One afternoon, as the sun painted the sky in gold, Alira joined Tomasz at the edge of the colony. They stood on a hill that overlooked the plains where so much blood had been spilled. The grass had begun to grow again, covering the dark soil with new green. "It is strange," Alira said quietly, "how life returns even after destruction. The ground remembers pain, but still it grows again." Tomasz nodded, leaning on his rifle as if it were a staff. "People are like that too. We bend, we bleed, but we rise. That is how we endure." She turned to look at him. His face was worn, his hair touched with dust, yet there was something steady in his eyes that never seemed to fade. "When I first came here," she admitted, "I thought this place was punishment. I thought you were nothing but a reminder of my failure. But now," her voice trailed off, but Tomasz waited. "But now," she continued, "I see that it was not punishment. It was a lesson. A gift, perhaps. I had to lose everything I thought I knew to find something real." Tomasz gave a faint smile. "And what did you find?" Alira looked back at the colony below. People were working together, carrying stones, laughing even through their exhaustion. Children ran across the open fields, their joy louder than the memory of war. "I found strength in unity. I found courage in faces I once thought weak. And," she paused, her voice softer now, "I found peace in you." For a moment, silence settled between them, broken only by the wind across the grass. Tomasz's eyes softened, and though he said nothing, his presence carried the answer. He too had found something in her, something beyond the battlefield, beyond survival. The days grew warmer as the colony rebuilt. Alira and Tomasz worked side by side, and each task, no matter how small, drew them closer. They shared meals with the workers, taught young fighters together, and walked the fields at night to make sure no enemy returned. One evening, a celebration was held in the center square. It was not grand, for the colony had little to give, but it was filled with laughter and music. Fires burned bright, drums echoed, and people danced under the stars. For the first time in many months, fear was absent. Alira joined the circle of dancers, her steps unsure but her laughter free. Tomasz stood at the edge, watching her with quiet pride. When she noticed him, she reached out her hand. You fought beside me in battle, she said with a smile. Will you not stand beside me in joy? Tomasz hesitated, then took her hand. Together they stepped into the circle, their movements clumsy but filled with light. The crowd cheered, and the drums grew louder, the music carrying into the night. In that moment, Alira felt something she had never known. It was not the pride of victory, not the weight of duty, but a simple, pure joy. It was the joy of belonging, of being part of something greater than herself. She had once been forced into this bond, yet now she chose it freely. As the celebration continued, elders spoke of a new dawn. They spoke of humans and Valorans no longer divided, of a colony that had become a symbol of hope. And though war still lingered beyond the stars, here on this world a seed of peace had been planted. Later, as the fires burned low, Alira and Tomasz stood again at the edge of the colony, watching the stars above. The night was quiet, filled only with the sound of distant laughter. Do you think they will come back? Alira asked softly. The enemy. Tomasz shrugged. Maybe. War never ends quickly. But if they do, we will be ready. Together. She nodded, her heart steady. Together. And for the first time since leaving her home world, Alira did not feel like a prisoner of fate. She did not feel like a princess cast out or a soldier bound by duty. She felt free. Free because she had chosen her place, her people, and the man who stood beside her. The stars above seemed brighter, as if the universe itself acknowledged the change. The punishment that had once felt like chains had become a path to strength, unity, and love. Alira smiled, and Tomasz smiled back. Whatever battles lay ahead, they would face them side by side. And in that truth, Alira discovered not only survival but the joy of a life worth living.